Hey everyone, welcome back to Tech Talk. I'm Juliette Beauchamp. I am here with Computer World Executive Editor Ken Mingus, and today we are wrapping up the top stories of 2019. I should mention we're live on LinkedIn and YouTube, so if you have any questions about the stories that we're going to cover, or if you have a story, a big tech story that you thought was the biggest story of 2019, let us know. I'd love to hear your feedback, because I kind of have an idea of what my top stories are, but we'll touch on it as we go along. And these are compiled from the 5 brands that we mostly cover on IDG's Tech Talk YouTube channel, which are InfoWorld, Computer World, CSO, CIO, and Network World. I named them all.
Good. You got it. I knew you could do that.
And so let's start off. We have a list here. I think we're going to start off maybe just from the bottom of our list, but this is in no particular order.
Right. These were put together, Michelle, thank you for compiling these, to look at the top stories, the 5 top stories more or less from each of the brands. So we've got 25 stories. We're not going to go through all of them because otherwise we'd be here until 2020. But, the ones that we wanted to call out a little bit as big deals in technology this year.
Absolutely. So I'm going to start off here. This is actually a story. So CSO's J.M. Porup wrote this story. He broke the story about Boeing's poor information security. I actually did a tech talk with him that's on our YouTube channel. It was very interesting. The moral of the story is that Boeing, as the title suggests, has a very poor information security problem. And he was in contact with a whistleblower with the organization with inside knowledge of this. It was very interesting. And I think it also sparks a larger conversation about how national security is related to Boeing, which obviously, as we know, they've had some trouble with their jets. And this was just sort of another layer of a security issue for them. It was a really interesting chat. JM is super, super knowledgeable about it, so I highly recommend checking out that episode of Tech Talk.
Not only that, and I also highly recommend reading the story, which is on the CSO site, because there's a lot of detail. And it's interesting how, some of the problems that came up with Boeing are so often echoed at other companies. I mean, security is such an ongoing issue, but you would think that a company as large as Boeing would have its stuff together better than it did.
Yeah, it's not like they're the only company with this problem.
Right, but they were certainly in the news this year. I wanted to highlight one. This is one that we've covered a lot on Computer World, and it's about cryptocurrency.
I love talking about cryptocurrency.
And that, we'll have to go back and see if that's the biggest story of the year ever. But Lucas Mirian has been doing a lot of stories on this, and 2019 was certainly a year because you've got so many companies. J.P. Morgan, Facebook is trying to come up with its own cryptocurrency. Wells Fargo's getting involved, and even Apple made some noises about it. And it's interesting because, cryptocurrency and digital wallets really do have the possibility of disrupting the financial services industry.
Absolutely.
Because the whole thing of having a blockchain-based cryptocurrency means you can cut out the middleman.
Yeah.
And it also extends financial services into areas where there aren't banks. So like third world countries, and also to populations that may not have ready access to checking accounts as we think of them. So I would just recommend that if you're interested in cryptocurrency, please take a look at the stories that Lucas has done for Computer World. It's a big story, and I guarantee you it's going to continue to be a big story in 2020.
I was just about to say, I'm interested to see how the cryptocurrency story takes us or evolves in 2020, because that's allegedly when Libra's supposed to roll out from Facebook. I kind of wonder if it's actually going to happen in 2020, and certainly not in the earlier part of 2020, perhaps in the later part. But
maybe by the end of the year. But, Facebook has run into some headwinds there because there's a lot of issues around government regulation, because government regulators aren't quite sure how to handle these things. It's such a new thing. Yeah. And once again, we've got a situation where technology is sort of racing ahead of where the rest of the world is, including the governments that need to regulate these things. And so that's caused some of the partners that Facebook had initially touted to sort of back off. They haven't backed away completely, all of them, but a lot of them are sort of saying like, well, let's see how this works out.
Yeah, it's risky biz, but it's also exciting to think about the possibilities, especially, for you and I, if we're in a country or an area that has access readily available banking access. It's interesting and it's cool, but something like Libra wouldn't maybe change our lives too much, but when it really comes into affecting people who don't have bank accounts or traditional bank accounts as we think of them,
Could
there's
be a game changer.
Huge,
Really could be.
huge chance to change for a lot of things.
Yeah, I agree.
I think maybe then we could go into scrolling up our list here a bit. We could go into some of the new Apple releases. I know, of course, it's always a big year for you when there's a new Apple release.
We
So
love our
every
iPhone
year is
11.
a big year.
Yeah, exactly. It is a new year. But I mean, well, the Mac Pro just came out, which is a big
Yeah,
deal.
yeah,
The new
yeah.
Mac Pro. I know everybody's making fun about the design and the cheese grater and how expensive it is, and the fact that you have to, if you want to buy the Apple monitor to go with it, you've got to get a $999 stand.
Yeah, and like an expensive cloth or something.
Right, but I mean, it has been a big year for Apple hardware.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, not only the Mac Pro, but of course, the iPhone 11, and I'm sure that the new MacBook Pro, which is the 16-inch model. In fact, I just picked one of those up because I had a 3-year-old laptop that needed to be replaced.
That's
and
the new one I'm getting.
It's really,
Yeah.
highly recommended.
I'm excited.
And it gets away from the old keyboard that had run into so many problems and that Apple had really been dinged for. I mean, basically, it's back to the future for keyboards when it comes to the MacBook Pro. I'm looking forward to seeing that roll out across some of the other laptops. But yeah, it was a big year for Apple, and I have a feeling that next year may feel a little. Well, we'll see. I mean, when it comes to iPhones, next year is supposed to be the big year for 5G.
Right.
And everybody's assuming that Apple will have a 5G iPhone because by then the networks will be pretty much in place to at least begin to take advantage of it.
Yeah, I wonder if they'll have a sole 5G chip and not like the two chips that we see right now sometimes in Android phones.
Yeah, to be honest with you, I don't know. That's so much in flux what Apple's doing with 5G and processors. But I'm sure it would love to be able to come up with its own 5G chip. But for now, it's probably going to be doing the same thing that the other phone manufacturers are doing.
Yeah, I think it was also worth noting that as Apple and, I mean, frankly, a lot of phone makers are maybe sort of moving away from hardware as their main source of income. It was such a big hardware year for Apple.
Yeah, exactly. And it's, obviously Apple has also rolled out a lot of services. You've got the Apple TV Plus,
right.
things like that. Obviously, Apple is trying to, and is doing a fairly good job of moving into services. There's, of course, the Apple Card. Let's revisit that one at the end.
Yeah.
A lot of things. So, yeah, it was a big year for Apple, and I think a fairly successful one.
Oh, definitely.
Did you want to go next, or shall I?
Why don't you go next?
Well, this is something that comes up, and it comes up across the pubs, and it's the rise of automation, AI, and machine learning.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
It's the sort of thing where, my knowledge of machine learning and AI really sort of goes with my iPhone, and the fact that it's this sort of predictive artificial intelligence that knows what you're going to do, studies your patterns, and then provides information and suggestions for you in real time based on what you've already done. And I think that's really cool. I think the productivity gains that I think companies are likely to see over the next few years. I mean, we're even seeing this rolling out in things like collaboration software.
Sure.
It can schedule meetings for you, or
exactly.
or predict what you're going to need to do or who you need to talk to. I think that's just one area that I think AI machine learning is going to be taking off. Again, that's going to be another one of those stories that in 2020, we're going to watch that evolve.
Absolutely. And even just aside from your traditional office setting, how it's going to affect collaboration, I think it's important to think about how it's going to affect a lot of industry. And I mean, you hear it a lot, and we talked about this actually earlier in the year with Keith Shaw from Robotics Business Review, is talking about how AI and machine learning could affect robotics, and you sort of hear this scary robots are going to take your jobs myth, which Keith said is, for the most part, a myth.
Yes, for the most part.
But I think it'll be interesting to see how that evolves going forward and what robots are capable of. I don't know how much more they'll be able to be capable of this time next year as they are capable of right now.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's something to keep an eye on. And I would really like to do more with robotics over on the IDG Tech Talk channel. So definitely be sure to stick around there.
Definitely. And I should make one more point. We had Serdar on recently talking about some of this stuff. And I believe that was the interview that we did. And in terms of artificial intelligence, everybody sort of assumes that within 20 or 30 years, artificial intelligence will be able to surpass human intelligence. And what became very clear from the conversation was that, no. That human intelligence and the way humans think is so it's almost impossible. Well, at this point, it is impossible to duplicate. So AI will be an assistive thing, but not something that's going to take over the world.
Yes.
Sorry, Skynet, not yet.
Not yet. All right, going back to our list over here. There's so much here that we've covered. We don't cover as much on video, but is still very much well covered on the sites. And a lot has to do with there's one article here about programming languages, and that's from InfoWorld. InfoWorld covers a lot, and this is just sort of a teaser. Next year, we're going to probably be doing more videos about coding, intro to coding. So stay tuned for that. Python.
It's interesting, too. I was just scrolling around for there's another InfoWorld story. I have to mention it because it's so wild. It's the 10 software development cults to join. That's an actual story in InfoWorld. It's really, if you're into app dev or just development in general, you might want to take a look at that. I don't expect to be joining a development cult in 2020, but apparently that's a thing.
I certainly won't, but you could.
It's out there.
It is out there.
One of the things I wanted to mention too, and this is again something we have covered at Computer World, is the changes that Microsoft has been bringing to Windows 10. There was a lot of discussion.
You guys have been doing a ton of that.
Yeah, Greg Kaiser, Woody, Preston Gralla, who we have on regularly to answer Windows 10 questions. Mm-hmm. But one of the things that's really emerged this year is the fact that Microsoft is sort of getting away from the 2 serious upgrades a year cadence, so that it used to be a couple of years ago you'd get an update in the spring, you'd get another big update in the fall, and they back and forth, and gradually Microsoft has sort of moved away from that. And this year the fall Windows 10 1909 upgrade was really nothing more than just the earlier upgrade with a few tweaks and some changes, but very minor stuff. And that looks like that's going to be, that's our prediction anyway, the way Microsoft does this going forward, so that you'll get a big update, a feature update in the spring, March, April, May, depending on whenever they get it out the door.
Sure.
And then you would have a different, a slightly different update in the fall, which would really not change anything. And I think it's interesting that Microsoft has sort of seen that that's what their customers want. It's what businesses want. They've extended the support timelines for some of these versions. And it's just interesting to see Microsoft sort of evolve in real time based on how Windows 10 has, either been used and updated or not over the last few years.
And big news for 2020, right, is that ending Windows 7 support.
January 14th, 2020, support ends, and if you're still on Windows 7, there are some options for getting extended support, although we had a story this week in Computer World from Greg that as much as you might think you can get Windows 7 extended support, if you're a small company, an SMB, you may not be able to find somebody to actually sell it to you. So it may technically be available, but good luck getting it. So if you haven't moved to Windows 10, time's getting short. You might want to get moving.
Yeah. And you guys have been doing, and that's something that's going to continue into the new year, is you and Preston answering viewer questions
he'll be back
about Windows 10.
Numerous times, yep.
He'll be back sometime in January.
Yes, correct.
I wish I remember the date off the top of my head. We'll let you know, though. Moving on in our list, this is actually something I would like to talk about, and this is something, I believe it's on our list, that we've talked about a few times now with Sharon Florentine, were the changes to the H-1B visa programs earlier this year, and Sharon knows so much about H-1B visas, and we've learned a lot from her, but those have been really, really big stories on CIO, because a lot of IT companies are applying for H-1B visas, and when those changes rolled out in April, it was probably quite confusing.
Yeah, it is confusing, but it's a perennial issue for the IT industry, especially if depending on how talent is attracted to companies, and there's always the debate that companies are hiring H-1B visa holders because they can basically displace U.S. workers and they can pay the visa holders less pay.
Right.
It's interesting though, because in the current climate in the U.S., the idea that this process could be streamlined, I think the concern too is that it's going to make it harder for some visa holders either to keep the visa or to get one in the first place. Always a top issue in IT, and clearly going to be an issue in 2020 as well.
Anecdotally, in my own life, I know people, acquaintances, friends that have applied for H-1B visas and have been denied and have now moved outside of the U.S. So the changes were quite big this year.
One thing I want to point out, too, that this is a Network World story, and I don't have the technical chops to really get into it, but there's been so much discussion around Wi-Fi 6. I kind of, and what it does for you, how it works. There was a story that they had about how big Cisco is on Wi-Fi 6. And, I expect we're going to see more of that type technology evolution in 2020 as well. I just thought we should call that out.
And something else that I'd like to call out, Network World's realm, is 5G, which I feel like a little bit in 2019 over on the Tech Talk YouTube channel. I was talking about it a lot. I was talking about it a lot with Mike Simon from Macworld PC World. And we sort of made 2019 the year of everyone's talking about 5G, but it hasn't happened yet. And 2020, looking forward, is supposed to be, like you said earlier, the year of 5G. So that's something that we'll absolutely be keeping an eye on in the new year, because hopefully more cities will have larger rollout, and we'll get more phones that are actually 5G enabled, as opposed to, this phone that's 5G enabled, but you can't use the networks anywhere because they're in very few select cities in very specific spots.
Well, and the thing about it is, too, I think there's a lot of people that don't understand the technology or what it's supposed to do. And also, the networking companies are trying to make it the best thing since sliced bread. It has the potential to be revolutionary, but because it, allows for smart networks and can give you amazing download and upload speeds, to your mobile device. But a lot of that's going to depend on where you are, where the network is, which kind of network it is. And so 5G phones may be arriving this year from Apple. 5G networking will be arriving in the U.S. this year. But in terms of the whole ecosystem working well together, I think we're probably still a few years out.
Yeah, it's going to be far from seamless for a little bit.
Typical.
I can chime in on that.
Go.
Yeah.
Well, most of the 5G implementations right now are private, because they don't have the breadth yet. So what they're doing, companies are doing their own private ones. So especially if they have IoT going on in their companies.
I've seen that actually, and especially I read something, it probably was on Network World, about like warehouses, like manufacturing warehouses, that they have all of these IoT sensors, so they've implemented 5G pretty much within the confines of the warehouse.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. IoT is also, one of these things that's been sort of evolving slowly over the last few years. And you can sort of see where, with the advent of 5G networks and IoT, and the advent of machine learning and IoT, that there are a lot of ways that the Internet of Things is going to continue to glue together, parts of the world or parts of manufacturing and business that have not been connected. And it's also going to see a data analytics explosion, because all of these things are generating data that needs to be analyzed, so you know what your company's doing, so you can figure out how to make more money. Again, IoT will be a big thing in 2020 and beyond.
Oh my gosh, yeah. And same with 5G. I feel like I've been talking about, less so in the latter half of the year, but IoT quite a bit with John Gold from Network World. So I'm sure we'll be talking to him over on YouTube in 2020, just because there's so much always going on.
And especially they haven't approved the standard yet, 5G.
Yeah.
So that still needs to be finalized.
2020 big year for Network World.
Yeah.
For Network World topics.
Time for me to talk about Apple Card?
It's
Yes.
time.
Do you have any more
It's
before
time.
Okay.
I don't think so.
All right, Apple Card. Yes, that's my Apple Card.
Card drop.
That was the Apple Card arrival this year. It's not necessarily an enterprise story per se, but it's another example of how tech companies are moving into financial services. And I think that's going to be a big story going forward. Tech companies want to lock you into their ecosystem, and now they can lock you into not only the services and the hardware that you use, but how you buy them.
Yep.
And how you pay them off, and can get get into the interest earning business. I like Apple Card. I've used it a few times. Apple's made it very attractive to buy things from Apple, which is of course the point.
Yeah.
They've got the 6% cash back right now if you buy something
for the holidays. Yeah.
For the holidays, but the way Apple has put the card itself. I mean, I don't know that I've ever actually used the card. It's all digital. It's like a digital wallet on the phone. but the way you can track what you're doing, what's going out, payments make things very easy. It really is a very customer-friendly way of doing it.
Yeah, I have not gotten an Apple Card yet, but I do have an iPhone that I actually just started using Apple Pay on. And first of all, the first time that I ever was somewhere and I didn't have my wallet physically on me and I was about to pay for something, I was like, oh my God, I don't have my wallet. And then I asked, because it's just one of the local businesses around my house, and I was like, oh, do you guys have like a contactless, or do you accept Apple Pay? And they were like, oh yeah, we do, because now Square card
readers. You can do that
readers.
with the watch too, right?
I think I can. I've never paid with my watch, but I had my phone. I was just trying to buy my ice cream because I got a craving while I was walking by on my way home.
Apple Pay saves the day.
And I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't bring my wallet. I wasn't bringing my wallet to yoga, but it was so helpful, and I'm actually I'm trying to sort of look at my options when it comes to sort of a cashback credit card, and the Apple Card is very appealing.
It is appealing. I've never had a cashback credit card, to be honest with you. And
really?
No, I haven't. And the nice thing about it is when you buy things, I did just upgrade my laptop, and the cashback for that was a nice little chunk of change. It sits there. You can use it to pay off the bill. Oh my God, we sound like an ad for Apple Pay, but and that's not the point. It's just that, Apple is doing this in a way that's going to make it, I think it's going to bring competition to the financial services industry from tech firms, and I think that's a big deal.
Exactly. I'm going to be interested to see who goes next. Yeah. I wonder if it'll be as the next sort of tech company that makes sense to do something like this would obviously be Google, because they they can put it on their Pixel phones.
Yeah.
I don't know if they'd want to expand it to anything that uses an Android platform. That's for them to decide, but they already have Google Pay.
Right.
And it could be interesting to see how that works out. And also, it's sort of a new competitive advantage when it comes to just their hardware. It's like, well, do you want the Google card? Do you want the Apple Card?
Well, just in the way that in the old days, you had the competition between Apple and Microsoft, and the chip wars and things like that. I'm hoping for like financial services wars from tech companies in the year ahead.
Financial services wars 2020.
Something like that, yeah. Anyway, that's pretty much what I've got. In terms of the number one story for the year, the biggest story.
I feel like going to. I think the things that I talked about the most this year on Tech Talk were definitely cryptocurrency and 5G. And those are, I think, the things that we get the most feedback about, that seems like people are the most interested in. Obviously, 5G and cryptocurrency sort of have their tentacles in a lot of different topics. I know over on Tech Talk I've been covering the Huawei ban quite a bit, and that relates a lot to 5G because Huawei supplies 5G hardware. But I'm going to say the two biggest stories of 2019 were the gradual rollout of 5G and the introduction of widespread cryptocurrency. It seems like it's more introducing topics and less hard rollout.
Yep. Yeah, I think I would go with 5G. I think the 5G rollout that's coming is probably the one story. We've seen it coming in 2019, and I think for 2020, it's the one technology that's going to touch the most people at the same time.
Exactly. And I think it's going to be the most obviously noticeable to everyone. Every enterprise, every individual person is going to recognize the difference that 5G makes whenever the day it comes out.
So 2020, the year of 5G, that's our prediction. We'll have to come back in a year and see if we're right.
Yeah.
Anything we should check in from the comments, people?
No, they're just some general things. AI, analytics, big.
Yep.
They're big now. They'll get bigger. IoT, some gaming comments. People are into gaming, but pretty much general trends that they're talking about.
Yeah, they're sort of seeing this probably the same thing we're seeing.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay.
Well, thank you so much, Ken.
Shall I do the outro, or you want to do the outro?
Absolutely. Before we do the outro, I do want to say just to our YouTube viewers, and our LinkedIn Live viewers, we are going to sort of be off for the holidays. So we hope everyone has a happy holiday. We won't be having any new Tech Talks in the meantime on YouTube or LinkedIn until 2020. But
however, there's a real big body of work on the YouTube channel that you can take a look at.
Yes.
Do some binge watching.
Binge watching.
If you
over
miss
the
our
holidays.
voices.
Exactly. If you need to see us over the holidays. Just programming note, we'll be back in January 9th. In fact, I'm going to be here with Michael Simon taking a look at some 2020 predictions for Apple and iOS and what's coming. And then we've got several more episodes with different topics through January. So check back right after the first of the year.
That's it. That's all I've got.
Have a good holiday, everybody. Happy New Year. Thanks for watching us this year.
Thanks for a great 2019.
See ya.
Bye.